So if we understood roughly what he means by identity, what he means the purpose of education is to enhance our students' identities, and that we have to deliver education or our pedagogy in a way that instead of disrupting our students' identities, it enhances them. We already know that we have to then look at our own practices, right? So what Brachers Project there is to do a self-analysis, in psychoanalytical terms. But roughly speaking, if you and I teach literature, we could ask ourselves, keeping these things in mind, having this rough idea of how fragile identities can be and what happens when we challenge a person's identity or their identity needs. We can ask ourselves, what is it that I do in my classroom that could do that? Do I offer my views as absolutely the right view? So that means I'm offering an authoritarian kind of pedagogy. Do I offer, saving the world, saving the planet all the time as my only views? So I'm doing the discourse of the hysteric, right? Do I only talk about these are 15 books you need to know in order to be a scholar in post-colonial studies? I'm performing the discourse of the discipline. So if I analyze my practices and how I talk to my students about it, I can already perform. No, Bracher's method is, the whole, like the psychoanalysis performance where you collect data, you analyze it, you transfer, right, like you do to the analyst. But I'm giving like a less psychoanalytical response to that, because that's what we practically do all the time, or should do, questioning our own practices. And then working towards what he calls the identity integration, right? How do we deliver teaching in which the three registers, right, the images, the affective, and the linguistic register are somewhat in a sync, right? How do we encourage our students to read radical texts, but without being threatened? So in this book, but also in one of his other essays that he had contributed to one of the edited volumes that I had put together, actually, I think Bracher answers this question more clearly, because there he's responding to Martha Nussbaum's suggestion and claim that humanities can do the job of creating our students or making them into more compassionate and generous human beings. But Bracher's point is that no one actually tells us how, right? So the way to do it, then there are, first of all, what he says is that the text itself, teaching the text itself should never be the aim. The text, of course, is a medium, it's a tool. And that when we are reading a text, there can be leading questions that we ask. The question not necessarily have to be about information, about history. The questions could be about, read this character. Okay, this character is from across the world. What's happening to her? Okay. And so on a human level, no matter what a student's politics is, they can see when someone is being oppressed. You don't even have to say who is oppressing them. They will extrapolate that from the story. But then finding that common human ground where this person reading this novel in 21st century America can empathize with the character in the novel set in Nigeria, right? And what are they doing, right? They are learning through reading a text by these questions about feelings, right? Or about sharing something in common with these human beings who are characters. They are literally enhancing their own capacity to be compassionate, right? And keep this in mind, this needs to be repeated in a course, which could become a little boring. But criticism of this could be that exercises like these, asking these questions, the students would immediately after the first couple of weeks know what answers you expect. And they'll start performing those answers. But that's the key, because the idea in enhancing identity is to shift the schemas in our brains, right? And if they are performing a compassionate identity just to get that A in the class, those schemas are already shifting. So to summarize, if we really want our students to have a positive impact in the world, if we want them to be empathetic, if we want them to be compassionate, right? We cannot just do that on the surface. We cannot just do that by giving them more and more information, because any threatening information to their idea of self, they are not going to internalize it. They're going to block it off. Because remember, the prime mover of our actions is our identity and its needs. If anything threatens it, I will try to block it. I will try to not believe in it. So in order for them to open up to new information, what first needs to be done then is an enhancement of that identity by giving them a secure identity. So radical pedagogy, by understanding how identity functions and how it has an impact on learning, right? By seeking ways of sharing this foreign knowledge with our students in a way that they can actually find a common ground, something that they can sympathize with, empathize with, or at least look at positively in a text, right? Through repeated exercises, then will eventually meet their identity needs, maybe overwrite or rewrite their personal, identity-bearing narratives, right? I mean, think of it this way. If my idea of thinking what manhood is pre-inscribed, if I've internalized it, that's part of my linguistic register. No amount of sermonizing about rights of women or anything else is going to change that. Now, if my idea of a certain kind of submissive womanhood is also within a larger system of signifiers, religion or others, then anytime some professor comes along and tells me women should be equal, right, I'm going to block them off, right? I will only accept these ideas if my own identity has been stabilized enough to not see that as threatening, right? And we do that through literary texts, right? By first reading a paragraph, maybe 2 paragraphs, not about, their symbolic beauty or whatever, but how do we feel this woman in this society? How do we feel about it? Can we humanly find something that makes us empathize about that? Once they've performed that empathy, right, then the schemas in their mind, which is a part in another one of Mark Bracher's book, where he talks about how our mental schemas are formed, those would shift. And when those schemas have been enhanced and shifted, only then will our students have strong enough identities and complex enough identities to become what we hope through liberal education, more tolerant, right, more progressive, more accepting of differences. So these are like some of my thoughts on this deeply complex topic. I'm pretty sure that I've not done justice to it, of course, and I've summarized a lot. Now, if you have any questions, you can always post them here or post them on my website, postcolonial.net. You can also email me, and I will try to answer them. Thank you so much, and goodbye.